line, it's just all about the positioning. Because again, talking about that spatial awareness, this duo does an incredible job in terms of just understanding where their priority rotation should be at. They're always consistent in the fact that they're not trying to just like linger in the more congested areas of a zone. It just seems as though Muzz and Paper in particular, they tend to prioritize making sure they get that Storm Surge early on, so then they can just focus exclusively on their positioning as the mid game develops.
Yeah, and when you go ahead and get that early Storm Surge, that early loot, right, what can you really do with that advantage? Well, you go to a spot on the map that is very, very good. And in this instance, in 4th Zone, they're going to go ahead and take dead center of the storm. Now, basically what that ends up meaning is that when next zone pops, they're pretty much guaranteed to be within it or very, very close to it. And just like I mentioned, they are in the next 5th zone. But as you can see, they're a little bit south, and all of the other teams on the map are also going to be rotating from the south. So that side will end up being congested. So they're like, you know what? We already have loot. We already have Storm Surge. Let's even rotate further, even though we are already in the zone. And they go ahead and make that rotate right back into the next center of 5th zone. And as you can see here, ends up being a very, very good position for them. And plays like this, right, that experience out of Muzz is why they got 6th place last week, even though they unfortunately didn't even make it out of opens in week 1. So I'm excited to see what they got for week 3.
All right, speaking of week 3, it's almost that time. I'd love to just get quick thoughts on what your guys' expectations coming into today.
I just want to see some pop-offs, and it would be cool for Moo and Bacon as well if they manage to make it to Grants.
You know, listen, I mean, more Yamzo and Rise domination. Maybe we'll see some Acorn and Cold pop-offs. I know that Bucky and Okus, they're looking to make this one of the last times they actually get to practice because for some reason Okus is going on vacation this week. I don't know what that's about. But yeah, we'll have to see how they do as well.
All right, well, it's that time. The competition is ready. The battle bus is ready to go. And of course, your casters, 11-2K and Jacob PR, are as well. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Zeke and our analysts, breaking down and laying the foundation of what we're going to see today. There's teams that already got their spot, but more importantly, it's those teams that we're looking at that still need to punch their ticket to the grand final.
There's a lot of pressure on these guys, right? If you're coming into a lobby knowing these 6 games have to be top form from you, like that's a lot of pressure that when you look at some of those names, a lot of them haven't been used to that kind of pressure. A lot of them haven't even ever been to a grand finals, right? And so it's like today is really going to be a special day, not just for them, but for us to watch and see how it all unfolds. I'm very, very excited, Jacob.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited. I like the one name they mentioned, Bucky and Okus, going ahead and making sure that they condition teams for that Rift Island.
Yeah, we know they want to play for it. Every single opportunity they can to take it, they're going to be there. And to be fair, when they've been up there in a lot of these weeks, they've been dominating. I don't think if you're another team in the lobby, you really want to fight those guys. Definitely been one of the better teams in that sense, but they need to be doing more after the fact as well. And that all starts here in game number 1. Let's jump right into the action.
On the NA side of things, we got a little bit of a different play style, and that's what I like to see in Fortnite. No matter what region you look at, they change up the meta just a little bit. And on the NA side, they like to fight, and this is going to be a fight throughout the next 6 games. We talked about the teams that need to play well today in order to qualify, but there's teams that we've talked about that need to condition teams. This is important, vital practice in a finals lobby, in which you can't really get anywhere else.
I think the big thing is that as much as there is elements of practice, this is one of the lobbies that is less like practice for Grands when you look at the qualifying weeks, just because of so many teams, so many players are playing with different intentions in mind, right? Not, hey, we need to qualify. It's, hey, we've qualified, let's secure our spot even more. Let's give a tough time for all the teams around us that haven't maybe qualified. And in that sense, it can be a tough lobby to play, just because if you're one of those teams that has to play with the mindset of, hey, let's qualify, how you actually approach the lobby will be different to what you've had to do anywhere else.
This approach from Umeezy and Swexy is a brave one. They still need to earn their spot themselves, and they're one of the teams that need a massive finish in order to make it there. But if they do, they'll create history for themselves. It'll be their first grand finals in which they get to play in, and that's something that is special around the lobby for a lot of teams. But at Slappy Shore, the south side is contested right out of the gates. Yumi and Source, they know it. They split it, and they completely disengage towards the rest of the map. Meanwhile, towards the north side, Miro and Cooper, smooth sailing to get all the loot they want.
The fight here at Lonely's again.
One side of the map to another, though. This is what we kind of predicted to see very, very early on. The early game skirmishes. Players, especially in these contested drops, they don't want to let all of that loot go away for free as Vortex is just trying to break in. Kix is already there, has to be careful. Fusiak is just immediately trying to disengage and move back, but he gets trapped in the attic and taken down.
Really nicely done, forcing the issue with the SMG. Not many things you can do when someone's running at you with that weapon in your face.
Interesting this time around. Typically in the past couple weeks in which we've seen Bugha and Threats, they split this drop, and it is a wide split drop where they can gobble up a lot of the loot, and at times they tend to reach on over towards Kenjutsu's Crossing, but that side of the map, of their loot path, is going to be contested by Pate and Cardi. It's almost a blessing and a curse. You get your loot stolen, but you get an opportunity for early game surge.
Yeah, and they're an example of a team that I really expect to see some wild things from, just because of how much more secure their position is in the series point leaderboard. I think when it comes to Epic and Clix, obviously a lot of expectations built up around these two. But do you think they're going to start delivering on those expectations, Jacob? Do you see these guys as a potential challenger here in NA when it comes grand final time?
For the past couple weeks, I was on the fence, believe it or not, with how well Epic has been on NA, and then Clix as well. But Clix actually decided to change things up. He didn't necessarily stream himself, and I think that gave him and Epic a whole new load of confidence. And I think that is what's going to make the difference. And they could be one of those teams that grabs the 10 spots that are up for grabs this major for grand finals. But Peterbot and Larson, they haven't yet punched their ticket there, guaranteed, and he's going to have to fight for it here in the early game battle. He's doing a good job of backing off his opponents, even boxing him up. That's Lawrence and Tavern on the other side in their round two. They won their first game. They got off to a good start, and they're doing the same thing here.
Really tough spot to be in for Peterbot. Just sort of playing around with these edits, trying to find different angles.
Wow.
And these two teams have been fighting each other constantly since both teams have been formed. And it swings in either direction, it seems, at different times. You've even seen some crazy fights between them.
Oh,
and
wow.
we've seen some crazier clutches. Peterbot now looking to pull off another. Peterbot picks up Lawrence and is now looking for the second. Wow. Peterbot.
Okay. I feel like that was revenge. Quanti did a very, very similar thing to them last week, but Peterbot, and that's exactly what you want to have if you're Larson or if you're any fans of Peterbot in general. We know his potential. We know how mechanically skilled he can be, and he's showing it yet again by taking down both Lawrence and Tavern in a 1v2 situation. And this is something going into the grand finals that you need to continue that momentum.
1v2 with 40 HP at that. Like, unbelievable scenes there from Peterbot. That's why he's a player who a lot of us look at and go, look, we want to see this guy competing for the titles in NA. He's done it before. He knows how to win. But he hasn't quite found that winning formula with a teammate for a while.
Sometimes you could be some of the best players in the world and it not work out due to chemistry. Some would say even due to vibes. Notch just trying to close in on Moo and Bacon. So much to fight here for the low ground. And Bacon's just getting tagged up on the other side. Wavy, Jacob, and Notch doing a good job of just surrounding and hounding, taking down Bacon. Moo is just under pressure, under siege. He's soon to follow. And a great start for both Notch and Wavy, Jacob.
Not the greatest start for Moo there. We know how big of a week has to be for him. We've not really got to watch them much, and it won't be the case here in game one either. We're not going to get to watch them. Notch and Wavy Jacob doing great to start off the game.
Everybody around the lobby No room for mistakes, even in the early portions. And you got Baka and Pars here. Some would think they're probably one of the favorites to grab one of those 10 spots with how well they have been playing recently, from Cash Cups to previous FNCS rounds to even the last major in Major 2. They've been slowly but surely progressing as a team, and particularly individuals as well. They both have so much experience in the international stage as well due to the FNCS Invitational last year. Go. Right out of the gates, they're able to take down Zukis. They're just trying to claim Misty Meadows to themselves, just in case the vault goes in that direction.
I like that. Always like my sneaky beaky plays.
Ritual was actually the guy who took down Larson, Peterbot's teammates, early on, forced him into that 1v2 situation, third parting from around the map. Reeton Ritual. I mean, what can you say about this team? They're one of the most aggressive teams in the game. Every time you watch their round 2 performances, they're just destroying the lobby. It's about finding that footing here in a finals lobby, and this is another go round. They have Kanata in their sights, and this is a team that's not afraid to fight and push up and finish that one.
Yeah, but they have so many options to pick from over here, right? This part of the map very, very congested right now. So many different teams all about, and they've done a good job to traverse without having to use or take much damage. So again, like you said, they're never going to shy away from a fight. It's all about picking that right fight, though, and not getting caught out as a result of it.
Slappy Shores, as we tune in, we saw this one very, very early on to start the game. Yumi Source disengaged, try to go for a separate loop path, but you can kind of see them in the minimap there, position. Slappy Shores, the nature, build those sky bases, and just kind of look around the map for Surge. Typically, you do have a ton of extra heals, so you don't have to worry about taking too much damage. But for Swexy and Omizi, with his own pulling out, they're going to have to run into both Source and Yumi eventually. Rapid and Batman Booga. I'm a huge fan of Batman Booga. Streams most of the competitions on his private channel. He's progressively getting better each time he takes the field.
I feel like you're just a fan of any player that used to play on NA West.
You got me red-handed.
It's like if you just happen to
What
play
gave
on
it
NA
away?
West, it's like you're just Jacob's favorite player. Like,
It happens. It happens. But he's a very entertaining, super skilled, and that's something we say about a lot of the players, though. Very, very similar to User in these games, to where you kind of look at him as one of the most mechanically skilled players, but they just need to get a little bit better in the awareness, a little better on the rotations, and every single time I watch him, especially combined with the teammate Rapid, he has been doing just that. Very, very similar to Chris and Mud Hut Boy, to where they need a decent day. They don't need a massive performance on the day. They just need a decent day that they know they're capable of.
yeah, but you know, it's easier said than done at times. I think the big thing for them is making sure they're keeping things simple, right? Not getting in their own heads, playing their game. You see, Chris is very, very aware and alert to the fact that these players are sort of rotating on by. I don't know if he'll even look to engage in a fight. Uni and Source now. The battles for caches all across the map reign supreme.
And you can see teams learning the intricacies, the ins and outs, especially towards this portion of the map. Yumi and Source already boxed up in this position well before the cache was even a thing. Now they have the full advantage. They have all the heals. Fighting against Amizi and Swexy, who are not afraid. They've got to this point by taking on all these challenges. So I don't think this one's going to be any different. The only thing they have to watch out for is they're on the edge of zone with other teams moving in from the north, and then even some position right below them on the south.
It will be worth it, though, if they can get the loot without taking and investing too much in.
I think either one of these guys is daring enough to make that big peek, but this guy's daring enough, let me tell you that. Epic gets the knock onto one. That's Poyo who goes down. That's a little bit of revenge from last season when Poyo took out both Epic Whale and Reet in 1v2 fashion. But as we tune in as well, Clicks is down, Clicks is out. So he has a bunch of pressure on his shoulders to not only get him back up, but to continue the performance that they're having.
Yeah, an epic world, just again showing that wealth of experience, even in crunch situations where Crix isn't there to help out. He's going to get the job done.
Just waiting as I see Rift Island appear. Prefaced it just a little bit about Bucky, about Ocus, and about a lot of these teams that love to go for that Rift Island. I do think it's an inevitability here in Game 1.
You're on Noxie here. Island fights are one of the things I love to see here in NA, so hopefully we get to see some island fights today. D-Roll and Noxie, not up on the island, but very much so beneath it, trying to capitalize on all the players rotating through this area.
It's really interesting because typically throughout every one of these weeks so far, we've seen Rift Island appear, and almost immediately, whether it's a rift or a zip line, teams like to engage and be the first one there, build up and claim it as their own. I hear some rifts going on, and maybe that is going to be the play. A little late to the chase, but better late than never in most cases. As we tune back in, Yuumi and Source, Swexy and Omizi, neither one wanting to budge off of this fight. But there's so much for Swexy and Omizi to fight for this season. I'm going to go and throw it over to Miniminer to break some of that down.
Thank you, Jacob. Let's take a little look at two teams here that do actually need a good day to qualify to Grand Finals. We saw Moo going down earlier on. They're being a little bit more aggressive, though. We saw them get 2 eliminations before Moo did end up dropping down, so not the best start for them, considering they do need a decent placement today to clutch up. On the other hand, Sweezy and Omizi, these guys, or Swexy, I should say, and Omizi, these guys need a top 8 to finish, and we can see them being a little bit more passive in their approach. They're getting those Storm Surge tags and playing it a little bit more carefully. Let's see how they do the rest of the day.
Slow and steady wins the race for some. Others like to get fast and aggressive. As Mudhut Boy is going to be the first one on top of Rift Island, claiming it as his own in a daring play because Chris is down. Luckily for him, there is a reboot van on top of the island, but if anybody contests it, that's where you're going to find a lot of those troubles.
This is just not the start to the day, though, that you want to be having, especially when we're talking about how big of a day you need. You want to be heading into 5th and 6th zone with your teammate alive, ideally. Peterborough and Larson also going to be standing in your way is never an ideal spot to be in.
When you see a zone like this, what are some of your must preparations to go through a mega city zone, the potential on top of the mountain right next to it? What would you be telling your teammate as soon as this one pops?
I think the big thing here, right, with this zone is that right now all these players who are on this side, a lot of them looking at rifting, and a lot of them will be making a decision, do we rift, do we mud? As you can see here, right now, with how stacked this lobby is, you know, rifting might not be too bad. Players going to be struggling to really take shots at you out of the sky. Mudhut Boy desperately trying to connect with anything and finding some difficulties. And that was very different to EU yesterday, right? EU yesterday, the games weren't as stacked at this stage. And so if you were to rift any sort of zone, it was almost instantaneous demise. So I think we'll see players chancing it here. When gliding or rifting into a zone, you see a rift pop there again just now. More players jumping in.
I like the way you use the phrasing, chancing it. That's almost like what Mudhut Boy is doing here. Using a lot of his heals, using a lot of his resources, chancing that he's going to get the shots necessary for Storm Surge as the fight on the other side of the map continues, breaks down. Yuumi landing some good damage through the covers, but it's a whole nother team that enter the mix. That's Penta, that's Teeks that are there, and now they're under pressure, getting forced out of the box. Yuumi soars hot on the heels as they clean that one up. All that loot for themselves. Yuumi probably feeling a huge amount of confidence after that one.
Nice. Cool thing is as well is that they should be able to sort of sit in zone a bit longer just to get their brick up before heading in. And they'll probably find a decent spot. But as I say that, the zone pulls towards the southwest, so they will have quite a ways to go to get to zone. We'll see how they traverse it. Mira and Cooper, another one of those teams that maybe will have quite a distance.
Just remember the stat that showed up almost at the start of the game. There's 500 FNCS champions in this lobby. And you can see 5 of them right there on Miro in the distance. They were targeting Bolts, who has another one. But with FNCS champions comes challengers, Aiden and Hound. They're one of the teams that are on the bubble. They still have a chance to get into the grand finals this season, and they almost need the bare minimum to do that. And that's why you see maybe their strategy is to hunker down, get some placement points, and not really risk those early game fights.
I don't know if I'm tripping or not, but I could have sworn I heard you say there's 500 FNCS champions in this lobby. Maybe
Championships.
Maybe final. I was like, really? Are they even 500 FNCS champions total? Either way.
Roller Noxia, another team that needs a big day, Levin. Immediately takes him, boxes him up, brings the loot back. They try to inch themselves closer in towards Mega City. And this is where what I was kind of talking about. I know I mentioned the hill towards the right of the Mega City. Well, the left isn't as easy either, especially with teams being able to box up on the top of those buildings of Mega City, even towards the mountain. So if you don't gain some elevation here and you use a lot of your resources, you're going to be thinking about a refresh, thinking about a path. What has the least resistance?
Moving through Mega City this season is always really sketchy in my eyes. It can be so difficult. Any little nook or cranny someone could be hiding in. And a lot of times you find yourself in situations like this where you're almost just running through these buildings alongside people. Odds are you run into the wrong building, someone's going to be there as well.
That's happened to me one too many times, let me tell you, especially when it comes to zero builds. But Paper and Muzz, they're careful. They're collected in their approach. Vivid even brought down some of the rotational plan, and you see they don't have far to go, so that's probably what they're thinking, as Acorn and Cold right next to Agers and Kanata trying to escape. Everybody's just trying to inch themselves closer. Agers and Kanata just staggering themselves just a little bit, letting Acorn and Cold move first, and they're going to take that same path.
Yeah, this is nice. They're not having to use many builds here, just a couple bits of wood being committed to this rotation. That's where the problem arises, though, when Cold is set up in the zone and looks back now at the players rotating in behind him. That's where you put yourself at risk, and Kanata caught sleeping there just a bit.
Clarity and Trashy. Trashy's already down. Clarity trying to make up for lost time, and he does get the elimination. And I did see it in the feed earlier on as well. You see he has 2. Well, he took down Peterbot.
Not bad stuff, but he is the solo in this game. And there isn't a great wealth of materials on this side. It should be enough, though, to keep him ticking for the next couple zones. And Carrie is one of the more experienced players in this lobby, so no stranger to a solo situation.
Trying to gather all the information. Look at what players are positioned above. Look at what positioned below. And additionally, he's kind of preparing possible rotations depending on where the zone is going to pull. And that's what a lot of the IGLs here in Fortnite need to be doing. Always doing something. We've seen it with Thomas and Malbuka over on EU. See it here all the time. Aviv is going to be one of those leaders. And they're usually towards the top of the leaderboard. Almost getting a haircut by Acorn and Cold, though. Not too much damage being scraped off. Nothing a big pot can't fix, at least.
Yeah, that's tough, right? You look at the way this zone's played out, and you could argue Acorn and Cold, Kanata and Aegis won't be too happy. Both teams opting to play towards dead side, putting themselves in spots you think are quite good, only for the zone to pull back towards congested side. And making it so that they will potentially have to deal with seams. Looking at them, you see Booga and Frets in that spot. Just sort of now trying to traverse back across the river.
Right now, they're just kind of using their position high above the rest, gathering information, seeing what duos are going, and this is typically what Acorn do to go ahead and try to get height. This is a potential opportunity for them as they continue to stay above everybody else. You're going to see a connection come out, and take note here, he's using a lot of his wood early on to save the hard mats to when he needs them most.
Yeah, and this is nice, right? 8 zone building up like this. They're sort of almost covering a lot of the angles of the zone. And that will make holding height for them in first moving much easier. Canada and H's aren't necessarily focused on holding height, more so focused on where they can find a refresh, because H's will not be comfortable with his mat situation.
I don't think anybody would be. Rise and Yamzo, newest player of Elite Esports. User is gone. Welcome in, welcome back. Hopefully they can continue that same pressure they've been putting on NA week after week after week, whether it's FNCS, Cash Cups, and everything in between. And this is what you're seeing. Rise is just getting aggressive. He has the confidence, especially knowing that he has Yamzo on his side.
Interesting, right? You saw them going for the refresh potentially, and then as soon as zone starts to move, they say, hey, look, we got to focus on rotating, focus on running in. Frets and Bugha had their eyes on the Yamzo for a second. They saw him peeking through that cone, but now focus on their layer more so. It's D-Roller and Noxy who are going to be stopping them from moving forward.
Yeah, with placement points just beginning to set in, this is not the time for teams to go down. You heard Vivid talk about it. 20 minutes alive for some teams, but unable to pick up the placement points. This is when push comes to shove, and Epicwell still by himself has all the tools in his tool belt to go ahead and try to succeed here. The only worry is going to be those builds, so how he recycles, how he maneuvers here through this endgame is so crucial.
Really nicely done from Epicwell. You saw him popping that slurp, waiting, and it just allowed him to run over everybody else and get into a safer spot as second movement starts. And so, again, a similar idea for him, just to try and clutch up as many placement points as possible, outlast everyone as they run around using their builds, using their HP up. And we're seeing it right here, all those players now running in the back of the zone, potentially just getting picked off from everybody else.
Yeah, it almost looked too good to be true, and it was. As soon as they look back, they take him out. You're seeing the lay of land. Acorn and Cold, they still holding on to high ground that they've had for the last 2 zones in a row. But right below them, you have to watch out. This is their plan. Rise and Yamzo just waiting for that perfect moment to strike. Threats and Bugha fighting towards the backside of zones. Third juice popped and add in the refresh. Threat stays alive.
Really nicely done from Threats, keeping his team in the game. Bugha's having some struggles, and now Threats is as well. Both these players really desperately need to find some sort of safety in the zone. Bugha couldn't find it. Threats finally will. And even then, there's players pressuring him from below.
Yep, they're trying to get in the box. Threat's doing what he can, but eventually he's going to run out of builds. He's not going to be able to defend himself, and that eventually is right now. Push comes to shove. Threats goes down. We end up in our top 4, and Rise and Users still have the front side of the zone.
You can see it cooking. Rise and Yamzo so comfortable on low ground. That's where Rise thrives, and this is why they claim space. Yamzo's there with the shotgun out to take people down. And Rise using that breacher just to try chop height, because they need materials, and they'll drop right into a team who's going to give them exactly that. That might be a game-winning limb for them, because these mats now can carry them stronger into this 2v2 against Cold and Acorn.
Yep, this is the 2 Titans of the region, a team that already had their global championship spot intact, and versus a team that is the favorite to take Major 3. Cold going towards the backside of zone. He's going out and around to try to surprise him from another angle. Acorn is still putting that pressure from above. Neither team has given up just yet.
It's all about these crucial moments here. Yamzo trying to get ahead, just making sure they don't get caught in any of these old builds. The breach up going to allow them to plow their way through just that bit easier, but they know these players are going to start dropping down. Everybody's low on mats. Nobody has much to work with other than the shotguns in hand. Cold will pick up 1, 2 HP, looking for another as well, but he doesn't need to. The damage was enough. Acorn just has to stand in the safe zone, and he will win the game as a result of it. Like you said, Jacob, 2 Titans of the region clashing in game 1, but it's the former champs who reign supreme.
It is just a huge momentum boost already being gained here in game number 1. We talked about what teams are fighting for. Well, these 2 teams are fighting for the bragging rights. They want to be known as the best in the region, the undisputed best at that. And Acorn and Cold, they're going to be the first ones at the mountaintop screaming it loud and proud.
Absolute powerhouses. And, you know, throughout that endgame, we saw they wanted to play for height early on. Even before first moving popped up 8th zone, they were there building up for it. Nobody really contesting them. And they did a brilliant job to stop anybody that was a threat to their height. And in the end, the crucial shots, Acorn was the one doing a lot of the damage there. And as you know, Cold's always going to be a threat, and Cold jumping there, making sure to hit shots onto Yomzo and Rise. That just allowed Acorn to breeze through. Really nicely done from these two, Jacob.
Yeah, we talked about it. You said it yourself. At one point or another, they rotated to the zone. They try to go to the slow side, and the zone pulls far away. That was a perfect example of turning a mistake into a blessing, because that was also the same way they grabbed height. They got to be feeling good. But I'm going to go over with Zeke and the analyst to break down game one.
Thank you guys so much. I love that you guys already called out Acorn and Cold. They have their spot in Global Championships. They're good to go. At this point, they're just saying, hey, look, let's play for more prize money. Let's just play and try to keep spoiler for all these other duos that are trying to make their spots. And of course, going up against the likes of none other than Iamzo and Rise. The favorites we've seen week to week. We've been talking about these guys constantly. And of course, I love like the poeticness of like they're trying to get their spot to Globals, fighting a duo that has their spot in Globals. Man, we're kicking off with a banger.
That's about what you would expect, though, when it's these two duos that are left as the final duos of a lobby. But for Acorn and Cold, what also worked out really well for them as far as that height control is concerned was being able to utilize a lot of those older builds. Even when they did have to drop to some secondary height layers, they were still technically playing the high ground in comparison to where Iamzo and Rise were at. But Iamzo, Rise, definitely very aware, and they were trying to do their best with those breacher shotguns to try and take out those height builds, but just not enough when you've got Cold playing Sleeper Agent, dropping down below to cause so many disturbances.
You know, a lot of people like to credit Acorn and Cold with a very refresh-heavy playstyle, that Siphon and everything like that. But, I mean, right there on high ground, I think he dropped down like one time for some extra materials. So they played their material game very, very smart. They game so much so that they hardly even needed a refresh.
Disgusting. Coming out from the duo just to start us off here in NA. Of course, we turn our attention to the standings, see how things are going with the Victory Royale and the 8 eliminations. Of course, on the other side, Iamzo and Rise packing heat as well. We look at the top here, and of course, we start to see a couple of the standings. Just kidding. We got to break it. I got too crazy. But of course, I got to assume Acorn and Cold with the Victory Royale in first place. Iamzo and Rise, they're in second, because remember, they had 9 eliminations. They didn't get the Victory Royale, but a second place with that many elims, basically the same thing.
As far as Iamzo and Rise are concerned, I mean, the longer that we see them just continue to go uncontested at their draw spot, that secluded spire, slap and go control, just so much opportunity, and they take full advantage of the materials and resources available for them off that drop. Because again, you're talking about it, 9 limbs, like that's not an easy accomplishment in a set lobby, but these two make it look easy because they have such good resources to utilize.
Yeah, and I mean, the Breacher Shotgun is so good at, right, like getting in the boxes and making sure that you can go ahead and control all of the pieces around you. But one thing that Iamzo and Rise did that game was if they saw any builds on the low ground, they were kind of just shooting in, and it allowed them to kind of just plow through any of those old builds or any teams that were kind of trying to control that low ground as well. And it just made it really, really hard to contest them on the low ground. So we pretty much just saw the battle of a perfect low ground game from Iamzo and Rise and a perfect high ground game from Acorn and Cold.
That's peak Fortnite, dude. I mean, two of the very best in NA battling it out. If you told me this was Globals, I'd be like, yes, this is Globals game number 1. Now, let's actually take a look at the standings. I want to actually see what is going on and kind of where duos are coming out in that, like, after this first game. As I kind of mentioned, because of the 9 eliminations, Iamzo and Rise are going to look to be right behind Acorn and Cold. A couple names I just wanted to highlight here down the leaderboard there in 5th place. Booga and Threads. We did see them have a little bit of a tougher time there right before the zone started to close. But, I mean, again, they just need a couple good games.
Yeah, a couple of good games. The same could be said for a lot of teams, though, given that we're only one match in. But one thing that definitely caught me a little off guard was how long it actually took for teams in NA to actually start to contest on Rift Island, because that's something that we've seen consistently, especially with NA, where teams, as soon as Rift Island spawns in, there's already someone trying to take Temple Vault Rift or just making some kind of action to get aggressive with Rift Island and claim it.
Yeah, and listen, Jacob had mentioned it during that game as well. I think it was like 6 zone. Acorn and Cold made a very brilliant rotate to go ahead and build up on top of the hill. But right behind them was Kanat and Aegis, who made a very similar rotate, basically just followed that in. So that's why we're going to see them on the top 10 of the leaderboard already as well, right? We're already seeing some of these top teams. They usually find themselves right next to these other top teams because they know what rotates are good, and that was one of those instances in this game. And of course, throughout the day, we'll probably see Kanat and Aegis throughout the mid ground, and I wouldn't be surprised if we also catch them on the higher ground at one point.
Guys,
And they look pretty solid, too.
yeah. I think the thing that scares me, remember at the beginning of the show, we looked at the series point leaderboard. We looked at that initial top 10 before we jumped down to 50s and 70s, all that. The top 4 after game number 1 are in our top 10 currently. I don't know what other duos are going to do, man. Because remember, some of these duos, they have to try and get series points by the end of the day if they want to make it to grand finals. But when you have Titans rolling around, how are you supposed to do that?
It's just part of the nature of the game, and for these players, it's adaptability. That's really going to be the game changer that we're looking at. I know for Moo and Bacon, definitely not the start that they were hoping for, but the fact that they got a couple of initial elims in the first place before getting eliminated themselves kind of indicates towards the fact that they can stay on their feet for the start and then just need to make it for the mid and late as well.
And of course, Mud Hut Boy and Chris also looking to make sure that they get 36 a day. We actually saw them up on top of Rift Island, but unfortunately, Mud Hut Boy was a solo. So maybe that'll be the exposed strategy coming into these next games for them. Go for that mid-game objective.
Let's find out, because I'm ready for game number 2, and we hope you are as well. So send it on back to the casters to kick it off.
Thank you very much, Zeke. Look, thank you for all the breakdowns, my wonderful friends. One thing I have to say, Jacob, Game 1 caught me by surprise. I was looking at the EU games yesterday and how some of the EU teams are treating, and I came into NA thinking it'd be similar. We wouldn't really see the elite level teams showing us elite level things. But it looks like we're going to get some real good practice for Grand today because the big boys are showing up.
Yeah, and you kind of take note that a lot of those guys are friends. They go ahead and play creative. They scrim on the daily against each other. And I think that's exactly why. It's about bragging rights. It's about just saying, I am better than you. I placed higher. I got one step closer to that global championship. And that is a huge amount of motivation that you're already seeing being displayed after one
of the biggest things is that, look, there isn't much, practice you're going to get between now and next week. Outside of this lobby, potentially, this will be the best place for you to put in work going into grand finals. And I think it's good to see a lot of those teams understanding that. And so as we head into game 2, hope to see the same. Game 2 starts now.
Game 2, hopefully it's as exciting in its own way as that last game. Players playing very, very calculated. And even heard Taco talk about it. Instead of instantly going for that Rift Island, players were just a little bit more passive around it, not wanting to risk it all. And I think as the games progress, you're going to see players begin to get a little bit more confident in a lot of these scenarios.
I like what I see here from Larson. Instantly off spawn, picks up a Mammoth Pistol, getting to work, no wasting time. Fortunately for him, doesn't quite hit any shots, but it's not the end of the world, is it? There will still be time to hit some Mammoth shots. We know that it's become the most important weapon in the game, really, from what we've seen. But you can see there the positioning from Peterborough and Larson, both players split, taking up different angles with the intention to sort of pincer in Tavern and Lawrence, and pincer in they will. Tavern already taking big chunks of damage. And Lawrence trying to regroup with him and almost body block him from other shots flying in as well.
So many players wanting to go ahead and get these early game skirmishes. Some players don't believe it's possible to split loot at these drops, and that's why you see a lot of these 50-50s, but it's those third parties that are slowing down the pace. Lawrence knows it's now or never, 2v1. They have to take it, but down goes Tavern. Lawrence is the last alive, and it only lasts for so long before you get sent back to the lobby.
Another win for Peterborough and Larson here off spawn. Not too shabby, right? They'll be happy about that.
Yeah, I think so, and I think Peterborough, like I said last game, this is a good amount of momentum that they're picking up.
I love the way they approach that fight, taking it from two different angles, instantly looking to pinch. Basic fighting methods, but very, very effective ones. This here at the Citadel, is one of the messiest things I've seen in weeks in Fortnite. What on earth was that? Two players looking to pickaxe one as they all land on top of the building there. Insane stuff going on here in the FNCS right now.
Can you imagine what the comms were like where his teammate was just going up the zip line? Give me another second. Give me another second. As he goes down. Great way to clean that one up and have a resurgence after the first battle. You can see Acorn and Cold are the only duo across all regions with a victory royale in all 3 weeks. And that's what I think makes NA so hard. There's too many top dogs.
They are back. Major 1 champions. They're looking a bit mediocre in Major 2, to say the least. And that they would agree with that. But here in Major 3, back to their best. And heading into that final, even though they aren't considered the favorites because of the dominance of Yomzo and Rise, they certainly are a team to watch out for as they have a chip on their shoulder.
I like how Acorn took accountability, just like a lot of players here in the lobby have to do the same thing. Fusiak and Jasper are just trying to have a much better performance here in game 1. And just like we've seen so many players contested towards this Lonely Lab, the threat of that third party is always looming in. But this time around, instead of just one team, you see a whole duo at the side of the mountain, but then another singular player in the distance. And I think with that knowledge, Jasper doesn't want to make any risky peeks due to the Mammoth being in it.
Yeah, you peek one time, and it's just wraps for you a lot of the time in these lobbies now. It's so punishing.
Seen it happen a few times already. And just like last game, though, Moo and Bacon winning their off-spawn exchange and not being as weak this time, because I think that was the biggest thing. They finished that fight. Peterbot heard it in the distance, saw them as weak, and pounced. You can see if Moo and Bacon qualify, they'll be one of 3 duos to make each Grands with a different teammate this season. That's impressive.
That's kind of crazy, you know?
I think it was Moo and Visuals, I believe. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but then I know for a fact it was Bacon and Batman Booga.
I don't know how people do all this switch and stuff. I feel like if I was a pro, I'd have like one teammate and that'd just be it, you know? It's like City and Cammy vibes.
I'm kind of
like I just wouldn't split.
It's progress. Each day is a new chance to rise. I feel the same way. And then you learn each and every situation. There's so many different situations in Fortnite that are even just a little bit different than the next, as Kix is trying to get out. Mammoth pistol yet again. That third party went around Lonely Labs, and now they're getting that much more confident after hearing a lot of this action. Penta and Teak season, they already converged into the same location in game 1 as well, but it didn't work out for them. So they're looking to use those learnings, those mishaps, as a way to progress here in the next game.
Lonely Labs fights always make me feel a type of way. It's not happening.
I expect to see this when we tuned in. Possessed and Zuko. Meadow Mansions was where we saw them last game. They probably disengaged, quickly moved on over towards Frenzy. You can see they took down Fatch already. So it's up to Pamsu to try to get his teammate back into the game. Which I feel like is something is very, very possible for a team like that. Slow and steady. They play very, very passive. Just checking in on a lot of our contested fights there in game 1 this time around. Swexy and Omizi. Very, very similar strategy in which to employ in that last game. This time they do have an elimination though. It's Clicks and Epic. You know them towards Mega City. Maybe one of the first teams up there. They know somebody is around, and they're just trying to go ahead and gain that elevation on them, because you can see by those players down below, Rapid and Batman Booga, there's already damage on them. They've already been in exchange against Clicks and Epic.
I want to see Clicks and Epic both in the end game alive together. Epic obviously having to play out the moving zones as a solo player, and I thought he did a fairly decent job at times, at least with what he was trying to do, whether or not it came off as a different matter. But ultimately, you want to see them both up together, getting some practice in, because from watching their games in depth, still much to figure out in those sort of endgame moments, right? They're not a team who are consistently going to be winning games or getting second places, third places in end games, that a team that can make it deep, but it's often going to be this little 6th to 8th places, right? And there are often things that are key details in your game that are stopping you from being that kind of a team. And that's only going to come with practice and ironing those things out.
I like it as well, because Clix moved over from being a main aggressive player, a fragger, to an IGL, and now back, and now he's playing with one of the greats that can kind of do both. They can flip-flop the roles when needed, and that's just a huge part of the game plan that teams can kind of utilize, not having to focus into one playstyle, giving flexibility all around. Tune in Bucky and Okus. They already, I believe, got a knock early on in this game, unable to really clean it up so far, so they're just trying to heal up without any real meds, any resources, shields, or HP to regain. That's what they're going to be looking for instead of just engaging into the next fight. Let's see how it's working out for them. Finished top 10 each of the first 2 weekly finals this season.
You see Omzo, they're taking big chunks of damage in the distance. I thought for a moment Okus was going to walk right into a free limb potentially, but he opts to back off as he regroups with Bucky, and so we'll miss out on that opportunity. But plenty of players here chilling in the jungle, it seems, as they look for their caches.
Yeah, preparing for either Rift Island or a zone pull. You can either use the rifts or try to get some mud so you can go ahead and zoom across the map. It's Kristen Mudhut Boy just trying to get as much surge underneath their belt as possible, which is going to allow flexibility when it comes to rotations, not being forced to wait for everybody else at the edge of zone as Zuko takes some tags over on the other side. Moo and Bacon fighting for a cache against Suscript and Fledo. They need to be careful because there's a couple teams in the distance that can see that cache and want some of that loot as well. Rotations coming out from Moo and Bacon. Luckily for them, they had that early game skirmish. They got some surge underneath their belt that allows them to rotate from where they were to here. But unless they got any more additional surge after that, it's always going to be something that is in the back of their mind, because an off-spawn battle, at most, if no minis are hit, that's about just 200 in terms of storm surge, which really isn't a lot, especially a lobby like this.
Yeah, not at all. We obviously have this team here on our screen, so we very much no need to have a decent day. 29th is the estimate for them to be able to qualify. Let's bring in Mini Miner to update us on what these guys are going to be doing to make that placement.
Fresh off the back of an 11th place for this team. You can see they've got all the ingredients at the beginning of this game to make it yet another solid game for Patek and Carty. We see them getting these surge tags separated from each other because, of course, they are now uncontested at Kenjutsu Crossing. So you can see it on that wide right there. They're playing very, very split, trying to maximize as much storm surge as they can. And they even managed to actually capture the capture point at the location as well. So these guys have got some very, very good loot going into endgame. So hopefully they can get that 29th.
Definitely have their work cut out for them. But after that first game, the potential is there. We've already seen it. About 13th place or so coming into this one. They just need to continue that same momentum. Depending on where they're at, maybe game 4, game 5. If they slipped up a little bit, that's when they can kind of pick up the pace. As Bugha and Threats. Surprised to see them not grab their global championship spot just yet, but with 10 up for grabs next week, this is the best chance for any team to book their ticket to that global championship. And you add on top, you start in the upper bracket.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of players who don't actually realize that. Like, just because you've called for globals does not mean you, like, guaranteed are, like, going to be playing in the money games. You're not going to be playing in Championship Sunday, right? There's a lot of people, I don't think, realize that.
But at least there's a chance for that last chance major. That's exactly what Levin's alluding to. 8 spots up for grabs on NA, which gives hope for some teams that might not make it here. But the first team to Rift Island, Re and Ritual, daring anybody to fight them. But the first team that is on for the challenge, Donnie and Problem. You see other players in the distance, the potential Rift causing a lot, and Re and Ritual, they want to try to finish this fight, put pressure, so that way Ritual can go ahead and capture that point as fast as possible. Man, that Mammoth was a monster of a shot.
Oh my goodness. Oh no, man. Sometimes you watch people use their Mammoth, it feels like when you're watching like a boxing fight and someone just hits a crazy knockout. It's so brutal to watch sometimes, and in that case, Reet going crazy with it in hand. You get another look at that. Look at this. Look at this. So satisfying.
I wonder, I think he fell off of Rift Island as well. That's just unfortunate. Just Reet makes it look easy, and then I hop on Fortnite, and I'm like, it's not that easy. Body shots, maybe. Tagging somebody with a headshot while they're rifting through the sky, not as easy. Fight for Rift Island continues, but not for the points. Reet and Ritual already claimed that for themselves, along with all that loot. That's 15 extra points, a huge boost, because that go ahead and gives players confidence when they know they grab those points and they fought off a couple of teams to make it so. And J-Sick and User, another team outside of the bubble for now. They got 6 points, 2 eliminations this game. The estimated placement for them is around 13th. So even though they may have had a little bit of a rough game number 1, knowing that it's still possible to qualify to the grand finals, that it should be enough confidence. But Penta waiting for the perfect moment and does not get it. So he's going to have to go against 2 players, 2 hungry players that now know he's a solo.
If I speak, I'm in big trouble. I prefer not to speak.
Don't worry, I got you. I got you. I'll put you in my little pocket that I have here. As Penta's trying to put Teeks in his backpack. At least he has a men miss, trying to out-heal the Storm. Depending on what they have on the other side, he could have time, but Penta takes a huge shot. Almost fights back, taking down J-Sick, but User is there to save the day. 3 eliminations now, and Storm Surge is adding up.
I don't know, man. Penta, he had a real chance there when he was lining up the Mammoth shot. I feel like he got a bit too greedy. He wanted the perfect shot. Couldn't quite line it up in time, and it costs him as a result. Still a nice effort, though, under the circumstances.
It's just one of those moments that you try not to let that happen again, because I agree with you, even if he hit a body shot, that's a double pump as Booga is out. Threats now has pressure, but with 4 different slurp juices, 5 exotic slap splashes. When it comes to healing up in an instant, it's not going to take long as he continues to fight back. 2 great shots, misses the 3rd, and that would have been a down onto Jackson, but with the Mammoth, he's still fighting for that piece control. Farming up when can. This is big by Threats, because even though Booga's down, his confidence, you wouldn't believe he's a solo.
Threats is actually so scary. Like, he is fully solo, and he's just made this duo just back off, like running into the corner. Ooh. Now they've regrouped and will force their way into the box once they realize the power the 2v1 holds. But big props to Threats for at least making them have to think a little bit.
And there goes the teams just waiting in the distance with their MK Alphas. They saw this fight go down. They're just waiting for them to push forward. And instantly, the shots go their way. A great game last for Aiden and Hound. Just because I mentioned them, Levin, guess what region they were from? Because I know them. I like these guys. Give you a hint.
I wonder. I'm gonna take a punt here and guess NA West, maybe?
Yep, gotta give them shine every single time I get a chance.
How did I know?
I think you know me too well. We're best friends.
Are we?
I would say so. We're gonna go get cake after this.
I mean, I guess I'm your best friend. I wouldn't say you're my best friend.
You know what? I'm going to remember that one. I got all the snacks in the world, and you get nothing. His Hound is trying to get the Storm Surge. He's trying to snack on his opponents. You can see working out fruitfully for them as they rise above the damage threshold oh so much. See them just waiting by the rift. Wonder if they're going to try to contest somebody or just immediately try to go to zone. It does look like it's going to be the latter, because they did get a little bit of a far pull.
Yeah, it's interesting. This game's actually not as stacked as last game was at this similar sort of point, I believe. So a bit riskier to go for a rift here, but I think Moo did a good job with his movement. You see Incy just sort of spamming his glider, using the trees as well to cover the line of sights and different angles. So it'll work out either way.
It's like zone pulled in and everybody felt the pressure to try to fight the position that they were in, knowing that you can't stay there too long. Zone's pulling far. A lot of the teams using rifts and the launch pad around Rift Island to get there. Zuko's just trying to grab all this loot, and he has to make that decision. With some HP heals, in theory, he could go back up to Rift Island, try to get his teammate back, but it is going to be a momentous effort that is needed for that one to be a
What's
possibility.
happened there? Code's down. We're gonna need an Acorn solo masterclass if this is the case. I don't know. I don't know how this happened, but either way, Acorn's gonna have to make it work.
We've seen him make it work before. You talked about like the last season that Acorn and Cold had. Acorn took full responsibility, full accountability of how they performed as a team. And I think you're seeing them back in form because they took that serious. They said, never will that happen again. As we continue to dance around the lobby, Kanata and Aegis find an elimination for their efforts, and now they're going to get all this loot.
Yeah, this is game-winning loot right here. 4 slurps, max materials, peak weaponry. This is good enough loot to be able to win this game. If they make the right decisions, if they make the right plays, Kanata and Aegis are going to be a real threat in this lobby.
They're not even getting looked at on this rotation. They were one of the first teams to go ahead and start that. There is a couple teams in front of them that try to gatekeep them out, but with as much time they've been able to save by quickly rotating, they can go ahead and stagger themselves for a short moment, let the zone kind of catch up, and you see everybody else in the mini-map extending outward, trying to give themselves the slow side of the zone.
Yeah, and unfortunately, like you said, right, because of those teams sort of holding them in, they won't get to pick a side of the zone per se, but
yeah,
even then, their loot is still so good that I don't think it really matters. I think they can just sort of play their mats, play their slurps, and they will be able to sort of rough any difficult situation out. Rise and Yomzo, on the other hand, are in a much stronger position, and so I think we can expect to see these guys deep into this game again because they also have loot that is pretty decent. The materials aren't as strong as they maybe would like, and so maybe eyes will be on Yomzo to see whether or not he can recoup something for the team.
Talk about eyes being on players, though. All eyes are on Chris with Mud Hut Boy down. We talked about the performance needed out of this team, kind of in the middle, especially compared to other players that need a big performance on the day. So every single point that Chris is able to pick up here as a solo, and you see more placement points ticking in just as Notch does go down to Reet. These are vital. These are vital for Chris's success, and he doesn't necessarily need to make too many risky plays. If you look at his material, if you look at his loadout, he has almost everything he needs up until this point. Acorn, on the other hand, without having Cold by his side, is feeling struggles of being a solo in a world full of duos. Pressure from so many different directions, up and below. But Acorn, you can see he's not getting nervous or anxious. Not
Yeah, this is really tough. 8 zone rotations aren't supposed to be that taxing. He's used almost all his materials to really get his spot here. This is a really, really sticky situation for Acorn. For him to make something out of this would be rough. I'm not counting him out completely, but it certainly is not looking good for him right now.
Yeah, it's definitely a huge mountain to climb, both literally and in the game for some of these players. This clicks Epic well. Having a little bit of a quiet performance, but the biggest change I've seen is they've been handling Storm Surge a lot better in this Week 3 finals than they have in some previous weeks. which almost put them in weird positions going into the end game. And now you're seeing all this flexibility instantaneously running towards the front side of the zone.
Yeah, you saw Clicks popping a slurp there, sort of in anticipation that as they sort of cheaped their way into zone, they would get tagged up. Fortunately, they didn't, actually, so maybe could have saved that slurp, but hey, can never blame a player for being cautious.
Level ground for the most part.
Oh, that's nice.
Yamzo and Ryze's old spot. Moo and Bacon, you said it yourself. That is phenomenal as they're able to get the knock onto one. Now they have the decision to make if they want to go back in the zone for the loot. That one's a quickly made decision as they take down Pax. And with the slurp juice popping, they have to go.
Usually, right, you don't see teams making plays like that once zone transition begins because it's like focus on getting to zone, but they needed the damage, they needed the surge, they needed the loot, they had slurps to play with. And so ultimately the play works out for them. Now though, the problem is on the backside of zone, getting into a safe spot is where the difficulty arises, and Bacon gets caught out as a result. Moo's able to make his way in, but now only with a couple builds left.
Yeah, now he has pressure of having to get these points, especially after the blunders in game one. But if you look at the high ground, it's Re and Ritual. Another Titan in this region waiting to pop off in this game is Ryze, Yamzo doing exactly what they did in that last game, playing the low ground to perfection and pushing everybody out, including Clicks and everywhere.
You see it. It's so hard to claim low ground against Ryze and Yamzo. Ryze is just going to force you out of the way, and Epic Will and Clicks will suffer as a result of it.
He's by himself. And he's back to the lobby just like that. But a great performance. They at least got themselves a ton of placement points to work with as Kanada's now by himself. And I feel a little bit of deja vu watching one of the best clutchers in the game.
He still had 4 slurps up to this point. Pops 1 and he still has 3 left as well. So even though he is a solo, lots of options in this game for ways to make plays and make his team successful.
He still has plenty of builds to work with, not too much, so he's going to have to look for a siphon eventually. And with the slurp juice that you said, he's going to stagger himself out. Reed takes a huge shot at the top of the mountain. Rokane and Burt, they're ready to challenge for it. And down goes Ritual, down goes Reed. They do not have what it takes to continue testing it.
Kanada picked up an elim in the back of the zone, and that was enough to keep him going, and he still has 2 slurps to play with. Boxes up here, and will be able to make another slurp pay if he so wishes, but the pressure coming in from below is going to cause a bit of a fork in the road. Needs to be careful now. He spots another player in the back of the storm, but a slurp will be blocked. Players right above him, mantling up a big shot from Kanada. He's doing everything he can as a solo to make this game his dream situation. And he just has the 1 build remaining, needs to drop down to low. There's a player in his face, and it's going to be too much for him now. Ryze going to stay alive with the med mist now as he crawls around, trying to regroup with Yamzo.
They're doing a good job. Yamzo leading the charge. They said second place was not enough, especially with how well they've been playing week after week, but they have to go through Aviv and Skittles. From Vault Loot to this, they have the Flapjack and they have the pressure needed to put it down low on those players on the low ground, even forcing Zuko back outside of the zone, but the elimination is going to get stolen away by Ryze. 2v2 situation, and it's over in the blink of an eye as Aviv and Skittles clean that one up.
Skittles clapping their hands after that one because it is as easy as it gets when it comes to a final 2v2. They quickly pick off Ryze. He didn't even see it coming, it felt like. And Yamzo, who tried to make a mantle play up, unfortunately was met with 2 shotguns in his face. Aviv and Skittles, who went for a late high ground take, generously rewarded for it with a big win.
I feel like they were waiting. They were watching like a hawk on that high ground because it was almost exactly as Reed and Ritual fell and gave it up. That's when they contested both Burt and Rokane, and they had the builds to hold on to it. While they let Ryze and Yamzo run the low ground, they stole it away in the last moment.
It happens. But the big thing for me as well in that game, it's Ryze and Yamzo once again in the final 2v2, and still no win for the team. 2 back-to-back second places, though, must be fruitful for the leaderboard. And speaking of the leaderboard, who better to show it to us than Zeke and the analysts?
Thank you guys so much. Before we get into anything FNCS related, I just want to say, Jacob PR, you're my best friend. Okay? Don't forget it. Anyway, back to the FNCS. Wow. As the guys called out, Yamzo and Ryze, once again, kind of being that consistent factor. No victory royale, but still a second place. back-to-back. Remember, they are looking to get themselves a spot in Global Championships. But of course, we cannot overlook the victory royale from Skittles and Aviv, and paired up with 12 eliminations. I think we might have someone fighting for the top 3.
Again, it all starts from that moment where Aviv successfully managing to chop out Height. It was a well-placed decision to actually choose to take Height when they went for and challenge for Height, so to say, especially when you have a Mythic Flapjack in your weapon. You can actually make it so much easier for yourself to just continue to spray and harass everybody else with their build who tries to then challenge you after the fact.
Yeah, I mean, the crazy thing here is that Ree actually had the high ground, and it was looking like they were going to go ahead and take the VR, right? 11 zone, you have high ground. We haven't seen any really, extensive high ground takes at all this season, and then all of a sudden Rokane's going for it. And whilst they're going for it, getting that little 2v2 build fight in, of even Skittles are like, you know what? Let's just go to the front side of this moving zone, and we'll just shoot back at them, and it works out perfectly.
Things you love to see. That right there. Now, other things I like to see are the standings. Let's take a look and see how things are shaping up after game number 2. Remember, these are just 2 games. We still have 4 more ahead of us. Not a big deal. But Yamzu and Rise, remember, not that long ago, they ended the day in that number 1 spot, and I think they're trying to get the run back on that. But, of course, we cannot forget Aviv and Skittles jumping up 8 places now to find themselves in the top 2. That's where I want to be. But as well, look at just the names. Again, Agers and Kanata, Acorn and Cold. Duos that are already going to grand finals.
They might already be going to grand finals, but for Agers and Kanata, I mean, what a clutch situation for Kanata to finesse here in game number 2. We saw them working alongside each other in game 1, but the fact that he was actually able to work his way through all of these builds, it's not an easy accomplishment by any means. Kanata just did such an excellent job at ensuring that he was staying ahead of these boxes. He was making sure to build right in front of himself, so that way no one could necessarily directly challenge into his box, and just did a great job playing on the backside.
And the awesome thing that I want to remember about week 2 for Kanata and Aegis is that we got a chance to go ahead and speak with this duo, Kanata specifically. And, he mentioned that their Storm Surge strategy had mixed it up. Instead of, playing all of these bases and boxing up on a mountain, they were going to go for some sneaky tags. And so far in these first 2 games, it looked like that's paying off because, I was looking at their material count in Zone 8, and it hardly looked like they had used any. So not only is the Storm Surge there, so are the rotations.
I'd love to talk more about that. What are you guys seeing after just the first 2 games? Or is there a duo that's standing out to you that's like putting on basically a grand finals performance?
You're already talking about it, but Yamzu and Rise, what better? I know they haven't gotten their victory royale yet, right? But we're only 2 games in, and the fact that they've successfully accomplished a back-to-back second-place finish, it's almost like it's inevitable for them to find a victory royale today.
Yeah, listen, Levin was gassing them up. Levin loves these guys, and the low ground domination just seemingly is a step above everybody else. And it's just all about making sure that anybody that finds themselves on the low ground doesn't feel comfortable. You're always pressuring their builds, whether it's with edits that you have yourself or just going ahead and destroying all of the builds that they actually have that are established down there. And, we could talk about the specifics of, how they place the builds, how they're playing the low ground. But at the end of the day, it's just raw skill, right? Like, they can aim, they can hit the shots, and they know exactly what edit to make in those certain situations.
And if we had to be, critical for a moment, right? We look at their score, we look at the points. They only have 3 points from objectives, which tells me in the 2 games, one of those games, they did not get the vault. Yet both of those games, they still came in second place. So even in the situations where they may not be optimizing, they may not be getting everything, they are still dominating and holding that number 1 spot. Things we'll continue to digest and think about as we move forward. But of course, a couple other names we wanted to highlight as well. Look at just the in 5th and 6th places, jumping up those massive placement points. Peterbot and Larson there in 15th, though. Remember, we talked with Larson before the show began, and these guys were seeming confident. They had some strategies they didn't quite want to reveal just yet, but it seems pretty good start, especially after game 2.
It's like most teams. You want to try and save the main strategies for this grand finals, but getting to grand finals seems like Peterbot and Larson, they're teed up to make it through no problem. But Larson and Peterbot, with that early game fights, it's definitely been going in their favor for the most part.
A duo that I want to like shift focus to is Epic Whale and Clicks, right? They're always teetering every single one of these weeks with giving us one of these pop-off performances, but I really feel like they haven't found their stride. They haven't gotten into the end game as a solidified duo with a lot of materials and a lot of heals to kind of back up their position. So I'm going to look towards these next 4 games and hope that we actually see one of those Clicks moments that we know and love.
There's just so many duos. I feel like you can just look at a duo point and be like, yeah, no, they're amazing, and look at the things they're doing, right? With 4 more games, there's just so much more we're going to end up talking about. More duos, of course, but for right now, it is that time. We're getting word game number 3 is ready to go. So who better to call all the action than Levy2K and my best friend, Jacob PR.
Thank you so much, Zeke. Best friends at it yet again. Who really needs Levin other than me as a co-caster? So I won't say too much. We still got 4 games left to go. What do you think of the first
You
2?
better watch yourself. If you don't need me, I'll just stay silent the whole game. You can cast it all by yourself, mate.
Well, I don't want that. So I want your answer for the first 2 games. I know you talked about little differences from EU and what we saw yesterday, but with the 2 games done and over with, what are your thoughts?
I'm happy with what I'm seeing. Again, I think the level of competition has been high so far in NA. I want to see a bit more in terms of what's going on height, right? With some of these different teams, we're seeing different teams taken at different times, which is a bit unorthodox to what we've seen again in some of the previous weeks. It's been a bit less formulaic, a bit less consistent in who's up there. And so as the games progress, right, what does that story on the height look like in the end games? And of course, the players who we want to be seeing making it, you know, to the grand finals next week, can they start and continue even to keep their level high?
Yeah, some of those players that you're talking about that are on that bubble, still trying to fight today to earn their spot. They've had a decent first 2 games, but we know that we see teams from time start off good, but then begin to slow down. I feel like today might be a little bit of a different story with how the entirety of the lobby is playing together.
Sure, it does seem to be a bit of a different feel, a bit of a different flavor to some of the different qualifying weeks we've had, but that is all good. And I think heading into grand finals, we're getting a real taste for the action. So let's get even bigger of a taste of that as we head into game number 3.
The first 2 games have shown us that there's still so much up for grabs in terms of experience. Being able to know that you can change things up and still have it work out for you. That's exactly what we're seeing here. A little bit from the Citadel, a contested drop that we saw in the last game is now turned a little bit to a split drop. You're seeing teams begin to fill each other out. They realize their position on the leaderboard, and they're trying to change things up before it's too late. Usually I say after the half, maybe game 4, game 5, that's when things should get changed up just a little bit, but some teams are starting it early. One side of the map. So next, a little bit of a split drop here. From Jitsu, all by one team's lonesome. Continue to move south. You see a lot of teams trying to figure out if they're actually going to split it or not. But Slappy Shores, a fight that we've seen happen once, disengage another. Omizi now has to think outside of the box about what he's going to do here in this situation because Swexy's already down. But luckily for him, they did take out Yuumi as well. So this is a straight 1v1 for the most part, as long as Source can stop the revive.
Yeah, and of course, this is a big fight for them because last game Source and Yuumi went down off spawn, and so again that revenge factor is huge, and it is not impossible with Omizi and Swexy not in the strongest of positions here.
This is like a little bit of an interesting one. Miro and Cooper, they're just kind of looting up. Source is just stuck between 2 hungry teams. Interesting to see what he's going to do here in this situation, because if he has the reboot, he can try to disengage, but the fact that he's staying here in this position leads me to believe that he's still